Hello everyone, I'm Siddharthan. This is the 16th topic in our complete Python course where we will be discussing about list in Python. So we will be understanding the different functions and operations that we can do on list and the different ways using which you can use a list and what are all the use cases that we can work with. So this will be the agenda for today's video and let's get started. So we have already had kind of an introductory session of understanding list, tuple, set, and dictionary, but I wanted to go in detail about list and especially in dictionary in the subsequent videos, as these are kind of like important data types that we have in Python. So in this list topic, let's just start with a very simple example. So I'm going to name this as the first example that we are going to see. Here we are going to create a simple example of a list. So I'll call this my list. So we are creating a variable called as my list and saying the list has the values like 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So these are the values. So when you use a square bracket for starting and towards the end, so it basically creates a list. If it's a parenthesis, that's going to be a tuple. So that's how you can distinguish these two. So when you use square bracket, so that's going to be your list, and when it's a tuple, it's going to be your parenthesis. And for curly brackets are used for set. So this is the list that we are creating, and now you can print this list by saying print my list. So that's going to print your list as the output, and you can also check the data type of this. So here I can say print type my list. So you may think that I already know that this is a list and why I have to kind of check this, right? So you may have this question, but the thing is when you're working on some projects or some use cases in some larger Python code, so sometimes you need to dynamically create this list, and sometimes you may not be sure what that particular data type is. It can be a tuple or a set, or it can be a list, and you want to understand what that data type is at that particular part of the code. So you can kind of use this print statements with this type, and that would like print and show you what that particular data type is. Again, you can do this with debug as well, but this is like the main use case of this type function. So here we have created a simple example of list that has like 5 values, and we have printed it, and we have also checked the type, and it says it belongs to the class list. So the next one is creating an empty list. So here I'll say empty list as the comment. So empty list is like often used when you're using a for loop to dynamically create a list, and also when you want to initiate a empty list and later add some values to this. So in those cases we kind of create these empty lists, and that can be done just by mentioning like opening square bracket and ending square bracket. So this is what a empty list is, and here I'm creating this for a variable called as a. So next I can say print a and also print the data type of this. So I can say print type of a. So it's going to print just the square brackets which doesn't have any value. So that's why we call this as an empty list, and it says it belongs to the class list, right? And you can also convert other data types to list. So let's say that this is convert to list. So let's say that, let me put this in comment. So let's say that a is equal to a tuple that has the values like 10, 20, and 30. So this has 3 values. So I have to convert this to a list. So I can say b is equal to, or first let's maybe print a, and then I'm going to say b is equal to list of a. You can also say a is equal to list of a, but I'll just save this in a different variable and also print this b. And in both cases, let's also print the type of a and b. So first it will be a tuple, okay, as it's enclosed in a parenthesis, and now it will be a list as we are using this list keyword to convert this tuple into a list, and then we are going to print the type of b. So it says first 10, 20, and 30 are enclosed in parentheses, and it says it belongs to the class tuple, and in the next case this has been converted to a list as we can see the square brackets here, and we can verify that by printing the type of this as well. So this is for converting tuples to list. So let me put this as convert tuple to list. Let's see how we can convert a set to list. So set should be enclosed within these curly braces, and I can run this. So it says 10, 20, 30. So it belongs to the class set, and now we have converted it to a list. So this third example of conversion. So first we have created a simple example of list, and also discussed about empty list, and next one is the conversion. So the fourth topic that we'll be discussing is like creating a list with mixed elements or mixed data types. So we don't have a restriction in Python for list that a list should contain only integer numbers like this, or it should contain float numbers, or it should contain string numbers at once. So we don't have any restrictions. So I can create a list, call that a, and say that has the values as 1 to 3.5, and it has like string value like Python, and values like true. Even I can create another list as its element. So let's say that 20, 30, and 40. So these are the values. So I have the values like 1, 2, 3.5, Python, true, and so on. So these two are integers, and then we have a float value, and then we have a string value, boolean value, and we have a list within that as well. So you can have list within a list, on and you can also have like tuple within a list. So everything is like possible, so we don't have any restriction on like what's the data type that should be present. So in these cases we have list and tuples as elements of this list as well. So this is how you can create a list. So all you have to do is just like use those words, and again we don't have any restrictions on a uniform data type, like a single list should have only integers or a single list should have a floating point value. So nothing is there. So you can have a list that has like mixed data types. So now let's see how we can access list elements. So this is the fifth topic that we are discussing. So this is accessing a list elements. In list you can also have duplicate values. So maybe I'll just quickly show this to you. So here I can have 1 comma 2 comma 2, and when I run this it's going to have that. But in the case of like data types like sit, you cannot have like repeating values, right? So that's another difference between them. So in this fifth case where we are going to access list elements, so let's create a list as a and say 10, 20, 30, 40, and 50. So this list has like 5 values. Let's see how we can access this. And we have already discussed about indexing, and we know that in Python indexing starts from 0, right? So I'll maybe put a text here. So I'm going to convert this to a markdown file and say in Python indexing start from 0. So what this means is you refer to this 10 as 0th element, this as the first element, this as the second element, and so on. So this is 0, this is 1, this is 2, and so on. So we start counting from 0. So if I want to access this particular value 20, right? So what I can do is say print a, which is the list name, and within the square bracket mention the index of the value that you want to print. So let's say that you want to print the second value. So first value has the index of 0 and second value has the index of 1, right? So I can just say 1. So that's going to print 20. So you have to mention the index, not the value, you have to mention the index. So if you want to print the first value, you would say print a of 0. So similarly, you can use this index to access like specific values of the list. So you can also say something like print a minus 1 within the square bracket. When you say minus 1, it's like from the reverse order. So minus 1 basically means this 50. So there are two ways to look at this. You can access this value 10 by using the index 0. The index for 20 is 1, this is 2, this is 3, and this is 4, right? You can also access this by saying this is minus 1 index, this is minus 2 index, minus 3 index, minus 4 index, minus 5 index. So maybe I'll show this to you. Maybe first I'll say a of 4, that's going to print the index fifth value, which is basically the index 4. And I can also print this by saying a of minus 1. So that's going to print this because minus 1 refers to the last value. So this is minus 1, minus 2, minus 3. Let's say that we want to print this 30. So what I can say is print a of minus 3. So that's going to print this number. So this is how you can access the list from the reverse order as well. So next topic that will be, so we have worked on this accessing. So the next thing that we will be discussing is slicing a list. So we have discussed about strings in detail, and we were discussing about this concept of string where you can cut a substring and you can print that, you can like play around with that, right? So the concept of slicing works with list as well. So that's what we'll be discussing. So I'm creating, let's say, a list called as again my list that has the values like the same thing. Maybe I can quickly copy this and paste. You can take any values. Just for simplicity, I'm taking these set of values. So let's say that these as 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, and 60. So I'm going to say print my list, and within the square brackets I'm going to say 1 colon 4. So when I say 1 colon 4, again we have discussed this. So when we mention the index like this, it's going to consider this value. So we have this starting index and then we have the ending index. So when you slice a string, right, so you mention list variable and you would mention start index and what's the end index that you want to print, right? So here I want to print from 1 and 4. So when you do that, your start index value included, whereas your end index value, this will be excluded. So what I mean by this is, so let me take this as 0 for simple explanation. So 0 means the value 10. So index of 10 is 0. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, so on, right? So when I say 0 colon 4, when I'm slicing this, the 0th value will be included. So this is 0, 1, 2, 3, and this is 4, right? So what you would expect is when you say 0 colon 4, it should print from 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So the 50 is the index 4. So you expect it to print it till 50. But what happens is it won't consider this end index. So when you say 0 colon 4, it starts from this 0th index but stop the way before this 4th index. So that's why I've said it as start index value is included, which is 0 in this case, 10 value 10. The end index value is 4, which is 50, so that will be excluded. So when you run this, you get the values like 10, 20, 30, 4, and then 40. So this is the distinction in this. And you can also say my list. So if you don't want to start from 0, the first value, if you want to start from the second value, the index of this value is 1, right? So you can say 1 colon 4. And that's going to print this as 20, 30, and 40. Now you can also say this something like print my list. You can just say colon 4. So when you say colon 4, when you don't mention any number, it's understood that it is 0. So this colon 4 is similar to saying 0 colon 4. So it's going to give you the same set of values that we have over here. So that's about it. And the other thing is we can also say print my list. Let's say 2. So 2 index 2 value is 10. So this is 0, 1, and 2. So this is going to start with 30 and print the entire list from there. So when you run this, so this is similar to saying, so the when you want to print this entire list, right? So you would say something like print my list, 6. Not sure if 6 is the value. Yeah. So when you put 6, you are getting this entire list, right? So when you say 2 colon and you don't put anything, so that's like the maximum index value, like the maximum thing that you're going to. So in this case, like again, the another intricate thing is the index of this value is 5. So we have 10, 20, 30. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. But if I mention 5, that 50, 60 won't be included, right? Because this is the index 5, but that will be excluded. So we have to say last index plus 1. So the last index value is 5. So we add 1 to it and we say 6, right? And you would get the entire list. And when you say 2 colon and just leave it as such, this is like putting the 6 in this case, which is like the number that's going to give you the rest of this list. So that's how you can remember this. So we have this 2 colon thing. So that's how you can slice the string. And the next thing that we can discuss is modifying list elements. So the previous video was about the immutability and mutability. So immutable data types are the ones those which you cannot change the values once you have created it. Say for example integers, floats, strings, tuple. And there are other kind of data types called as mutable data types. So these data types can be edited or modified once they have been created. So these are called mutable data types or mutable objects, and list is an example of mutable objects. So we can edit those values. So let's say that here I'm creating a list with this same set of values. I'm just like naming this as a that has value as, let's say, 5 values, 10, 20, 30, and 40. And let's say that I want to change this first value. So maybe I'll first change this, print this a, and then I'll say a of 0. So when I say a of 0, it means this 10, right? Because 10 is of the index 0. So I can say a of 0 is equal to 99 and print this a. So first we add the values 10, 20, 30, 40, and 50, and using this index we have changed the 0th index value from 10 to 99 using this. So this is how you can modify a value. So if you want to, like, let's say change another value, let's say this 30 needs to be changed. The index of this 30 is 2. So I can mention 2. So that's going to say 20, 30, 40, and 50. So here we are recreating this a list. So that's why we don't see this 99 anymore. So we are creating this list newly, and then we are changing this third value with 99. So this is how you can modify the list elements. And the other thing is now, so we have seen how we can edit a value. Now let's see how you can add new values to a list. So this would be adding new elements to a list. So if I have a list as a is equal to 10, 20, 30, 40 and 50, so I can say a dot append, I'll say 100. So when I say 100, the value 100 will be added to this list, and now I can print this a. So that's going to say 10, 20, 30, 40 and 50. You can again add like any data types. It's not like we can add only integers, as we know that list supports other data types as well. So here I can say a Python, which is a string. So that would add this string value to this list. Not only the strings, you can also add list to a list. So here I'm going to append a list that has values like 99 and let's say 100. So when I print this, as you can see, we are not adding this 99 and 100 separately, but we are adding this list to this list. So we have 10, 20, 30, 40, and this list has been appended. But what if you want to add this 99 and 100 as values to this? So in that case, so here we have used this method called as append. So instead you can say extend. So when you do this extend, so instead of adding this 99 and 100 as a list, this can be added as the individual element. So this will be unpacked and added like individually 99 and 100. So this is how you can kind of like extend a list with another iterable data type like this, another list. So we have 10, 20, 30 and 40, 50. When you use append, this 99 and 100 which is present in a list, as you can see the square brackets here. So those will be added as a list, but when you do this extend, it's going to add those values individually. And you can also like merge two lists. I'll say that a is equal to 1, 2 and 5, and we have another list as 10, 3 and another 10. So if you want to, let's say, combine these two lists, you can say c is equal to a plus b. So a plus b basically joins the two lists that we have. Again, it won't order it or anything, it will just like stitch these two lists together, and you can finally print your C. So we have 1, 2, 5, 10, 3 and 10. So this is how you can join two lists. So this is another example that I wanted to explain you. And we also have this insert method. So all these are coming under this modifying this list elements, right? So I'll not number this now. So we have this insert statement. So insert adds a value at a specific index. So I can say a is equal to 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5, and I'll print this a, and now I can say a dot insert 0 comma 100. We have two commas here, and then let's print this a. So we have the values as 100, 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. So what I've done is I've used this insert method to add the value or insert the value 100 at a specific index, that is 0. So the syntax for this is list that you're creating dot index is the method, and then you have to mention the index at which you want to add, index at which it should add. Maybe I'll just mention this as index and value you want to add. So in this case, we have created a list that has 5 values, and in the 0th index, we want to add another value called as 100. So this is different from the previous case, like this one where we are changing a value, but in this case we are not changing any values, we are just like inserting another value to this. You can also do this by saying, let's say 2. So you have 0, 1 and 2, right? So in this 2 index value, we are going to insert this 100 value. So you have the values as 1, 2 and 100. Now 100 takes that index of 2 rather than 3, and then we have the values, but we haven't like deleted that value 3. So this is this example. So like this is how you can use this insert. So this is 6, 7 and 8. Let's consider like all these are related to adding new elements to this list. So in this case we have used this extend, right? So now I'll say 8 one is removing values from a list. So first we are going to discuss about remove method. I think this we have already discussed, but that's okay. So I'll say a is equal to 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5, and first you can print this a, and then you can say a dot remove 4 and print this. So this is going to remove the value 4 from this, and now that will be edited in that original list of A. So here we are not creating a new copy of A. We are just like editing the original variable that we have created with this list 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. I'm saying remove the value 4, and then we are printing it, and now we are not seeing that 4 anymore. So this is one way to do this. We also have like an interesting method called as pop. So I'll say pop method. So when you can just like copy this, maybe I'll just create this new one and say val or value is equal to a dot pop, and print this value and also print a. Let's see what happens here. So when you do this a dot pop, that's going to remove the last value from that list, and that removed value will be stored in the variable value. So the variable that you're creating for this a dot pop. So there are two things that are happening here. One is this list A has been edited where we are removing the last value, but we are not discarding that value. So that value has been stored in a different variable. In the previous case, we are just like removing a particular value, right? But it's not stored anywhere. But in the case of pop, we are storing it. And as this pop has the ability to remove the values at the last, there is like a different data type in programming called as stack, where you can only add values on top of the other. Like you cannot insert any values, and if you want to remove any values, you can just remove the last value. It's just like a stack of plates. If there are a stack of plates, you put one plate on top of other, and if you want to remove, if you want to properly remove, you take the top plate first and the other plate and the other plate. So similarly, you can remove this 5 first, and then using this pop method you can remove this 4 first. So in Python we don't have this data type called a stack, but we can create a stack like data type using this pop method along with list. So when you don't mention anything here, so this pop method is going to remove the last value. But there is also another way to use this pop method. So if you don't want to remove the last value, you want to remove this value 4, you don't have to mention 4 here, you have to mention the index. Maybe for this I'll take the example of 10, 20, 30, 40, and 50, as the index value can be a bit confusing. So let's say that we want to remove this value and store it. So previously we were not like storing it using this remove, right? But let's say you want to remove this value and store it. Look at this index. So this index is 0, 1, 2, and 3 is index, right? So within this pop mention 3 and run this. So that's going to remove the value that's present in index 3, that is 40, and that's going to be stored in this variable called as value. So this is how you can remove values based on index and store it somewhere. And now let's say that you just want to delete it and you don't want to store this 40 anywhere. In that case, you can do something like this. So create a list, and this is delete method. So the keyword is delete. So create this a list and say del a of, let's say, 1, and then print this a. So here we are deleting the index also based on the index we are deleting the value. So when I say a of 1, it's nothing but this is index 0, this is index 1. This 20 will be removed, and we would get the value as 10, 30, 40, and 50. So this is how the values can be removed from a list. So the next thing that we will be discussing is using for loop along with list. So I'll say again, there are like several things that we can do with a list and a for loop. First, let's see how we can create a list with a for loop. So instead of assigning the values at start, so you can dynamically create some values. So this is for creating a list using for loop. So let's, for this, as I said, we will be initiating this variable a as an empty list and say for I in range, let's say 0 to 10, a dot append I, and finally print this a. Let's understand this. So this is similar to index as we have discussed already. So the starting index value 0 will be included, and this 10 will be excluded. So you would have, so that you would have the values from 0, 1, 2, 3 all the way up to 9. So let's run this and see. So what happens here is when the for loop runs for the first time, I takes the value of 0, and this value has been appended to this list A, right? And in the next step, I takes the value of 1, and that one has been appended to this list that already has 1 in it. Maybe I'll print this and show you, that would make better sense. So first we are printing I, we are appending this in this, and finally printing this, and final list, let's print within, some markers. I'm going to say 30. So this is going to print this iPhone 30 times, and just like copy this and paste it over here. Let's understand this. So what happens is, maybe here also I'll put a marker. Okay, let's understand this. So this is what happens when the for loop runs for the first time. So I take the value of 0. So we are printing this I, and this value I, which is 0 in the first case, is appended to this empty list A. So now this list A has been changed to a list that has value 0, right? And now the second time the for loop runs, the second time the value I takes the value of 1. That's what we have printed this, and this is appended to this list A. Now the list A is not empty, it already has the value 0. So now we add 0 and 1. The next time 2 is the value of I, and it's get appended, and this process goes on until value 9. This is because, as I said, the starting index will be included. This ending index won't be included, so you would get the values from 0 to 9. So that's why you're seeing the values from 0 to 9 in the final list. So maybe I'll just like copy this entire same thing and put this without any print statements in between so that it looks clean. So this is how you can create a list dynamically using for loop. Let's say that we want to do this, and again you can also say this 1 comma 10, or if you want the values between 1 and 10, you can say 1 comma 11. So 1 will be included and this 11 will be excluded. So you would get the values from 1 to 10. So this is the values. So what if you want all the two multiples of 2? So you can simply say same thing, but just instead of adding this I, I'm going to multiply this with 2. So before adding this value to this list, it's going to multiply that value with 2. So it's just like doing the same thing, but before appending this 1 will be multiplied with 2 and you get the value 2 here. So 2 is multiplied with again 2 and you get the value 4 here. So all these individual values that we unpack from this range, keyword range, are multiplied with 2. So this is how you can create this. And there is an interesting concept called as list comprehension that's going to let us easily create list using this for loop. So here we have seen, right? So this is how you simply create a for loop and then create a list that has values from 1 to 10, right? That is like, let's say, as 1 2 3 and 4, 3 lines basically. Now instead you can just do this in a single line, saying a is equal to, open the square brackets, say I for I in range 1 comma 10. This is all that's going to take. So let's print this and check this once. So it has the values from 0 to 9, as we have mentioned 10. If you want the value 10, you can change this to 1 and 11. So what happens here is it's just like the same thing, but we are writing this in a single line. So when I say I for I in range 1 to 11, so this for loop is going to run these many number of times. So I takes the value 1 for the first time and all the way up to 10. And we are just putting all this in a square bracket. So this is what happens. So we create a list that has the values from this 1 to 11. Again, if you want to have all the multiples of 2, just multiply this I value. So this I value that you're mentioning over here at the first, right? So this is just similar to appending this. So this append step happens because we put this I over here. So if you want to create values in the list with multiples of 2, just like multiply this I with 2 and you would get the values as 2 4 6 8 10 12 and so on. Okay, and if you want to, let's say, have squares, again that's simple, just put another asterisk. So this now becomes I power 2, so I exponent 2, so you would get 1 square 2 square 3 square and so on. So this is how you can use list comprehension to create list dynamically with some dynamic values in it. So the next step is, so here we have used a for loop to create a list. Now how you can iterate over a list, so let's discuss that. So this is the 10th example, right? 11th one is iterating through a list. So let's say that A has the values 1 2 3 4 and 5. I can say for, maybe instead of 5 I'll say val, or which stands for value. For val in A, print A. So in this case what happens is, oh sorry, I have to print val. So we are not iterating it over range. Rather, we are iterating over this list. So when the for loop runs for the first time, val takes the value 1. When it runs for the second time, val takes the value 2, and we are printing it at each step. So the third time it takes the value 3, 4, and 5, and so on. If you want to, let's say, print all these numbers multiplied with 10, just like mentioned, val into 10. So each time it takes like individual values of this list, multiply this with 10. So if you want to create another list that has these values, you can say b is equal to again an empty list. So here you can just say b dot append val into 10. So now you're going to have two lists. The first list has the values 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and the second list is going to have the values where it's corresponding to this list but as the all the 10 multiples. So when I print this outside the list, so print your list outside the for loop, because when you put this inside the for loop, at each iteration it's going to print the list, and you can see how it changes dynamically. But if you want to see the end result, just put it outside this for loop. So this is list A, and now we have another list called as B, and that has values that are multiples of 10. So this is how you can iterate a list through a for loop. We'll put the simple example in the first place. This we are creating another list, right? So here I'll just say 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and say for val in A. Again, this val can be I. It's not like this is like any variable name that you can create. So you don't have to say that you can only have I or val or anything in it. Now I'll print val. So this is a for loop and list go hand in hand. Again, there are few more complex stuff that we can try there, but let's discuss that when we are at the point where we are discussing about for loop. So these are some basic example, and I hope that by this point you know that the purpose of this for loop is to perform a task again and again, a specific task. In this case, we just want to perform the same task again and again, which is like multiplying it with 10. So instead of manually doing that with 10 lines of code, we or 5 lines of code in this case, as we have 5 elements, we have used a for loop to do this. So that's the purpose of for loop. Let's discuss about for loop when we get that, so don't worry about it. So this is another example. So the last concept that we are going to discuss is list methods, or the list operations, or the functions. You can call it anything, but the correct way to say this is list methods. So let's say that we have a list that has values, the same set of values, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. There are certain methods or the functions you can use along with this. So there is a method called as len, which stands for length. And when you use this length, it's going to tell you how many values are present in this list. So it says 5. So here don't mix this up with the index concept. So here we don't consider that indexing with 0. So that's not about it, this length. So length is just like counting, normal counting. So it counts the total number of values that's present in a list. So here we have 5 values, right? So it says there are 5 values in it. And then there is a concept of copy. So you can say b is equal to a dot copy. So that's going to create a new copy for this list and store this in a new variable called as b. And now you can print this a, and then you can print this b as well. So b is like a copy of a, right? So there are like few other things as well. So let's say that we have a value, something like this. We have a list that is like kind of unsorted. So it's like not in order. So you can say a dot sort. Yeah, don't have to mention anything. So this original list will be sorted. I can say print. Okay. So this would sort the values. We have 5, 3, 4, 1, 2. So this sort is this inbuilt function or the method that we have with list objects. So that's going to sort the values. There is also another thing that we can discuss called as reverse. So this is not going to reverse this. It will just like reverse. It's sorry. It's not going to put this in descending order. It's just going to reverse whatever you have passed to it. So we have 5, 3, 4, 1, 2, right? So when you reverse this list, you would get the values as 2, 1, 4, 3, and 5, right? So not in order, but just like a reverse of the original list that you're creating. So the sort is used to arrange orders in ascending order. This reverse is used to just reverse whatever list that you have passed to it. And then you have something like this. So I'll copy this list A and say print sum of a. So that's going to give you the sum of all the individual values that we have in a list. So if you, let's say there is a list that has like hundreds of values and you want to count the values individually, so you can just use this sum method. And then you have this other things as well. So say min of a, so that's going to give you the minimum value, which is 1. You can say max, sorry, so it should be max of a, that's going to give the maximum value, that is 5. So these are some of the interesting list operations and the methods that you can do. There are like few others as well, so you can explore that, but this is like enough for now. So later when we work on more use cases and stuff in Python, let's explore those aspects as well, but these are like good to start. So here we have started with just considering a simple example of list. So you can create a list. We know that it's in square brackets, check the type and so on. We have also seen how to create a empty list. Just put two square brackets, and then we have seen about converting one data type to another, one data type to a list, let's say a tuple to list and set to list, and then mixer data types. How you can have a list that has like different data types in it, and how to access specific values using the index value. And next is like slice specific strings and like have a sub list, maybe we can call that. So I have like specific values from this original list, and we have also seen how you can modify the values in the list as this is like a mutable object, and also add new elements and like append, and also about to extend the difference between these two, and how to join to list, insert method to insert at specific index, and also remove pop, which is going to be really helpful for us, and delete method for removing the values, and how to use for loop along with this list. So we have created the list using for loops in different methods with multiples of 2, powers of 2, and so on. And we have also discussed about this interesting concept of list comprehension, where you can create a list in a single line of code, right, using for loop, and then iterating over a list. And finally we discussed about this list methods. So I hope that everyone is clear about the concepts that we have discussed. So please practice this code. So maybe a bit confusing at start, but once you practice this like a few times, right, so you will definitely get this. So that is all from my side for this video. I'll see you in the next upload. Thanks for watching.